Imagine going back thousands of years, long before modern England existed. At that time, the land was known as Britain, and the people living there were called Britons. Life was completely different from what we know today. The country didn't look the same, and the people didn't live, dress, or speak like we do now. If you could travel back about 2,000 years, even before the birth of Christ, you would still recognize the natural beauty of the land, the same hills, valleys, rivers, and lakes that exist today. But almost everything else would feel unfamiliar. There were no crowded cities, no peaceful villages with church towers rising above the trees, and no farms, orchards, or gardens like we see now. Instead of paved streets and developed towns, the land was wild and untouched. It was a very different world, where nature dominated and human life was simple and far removed from the comforts we are used to today. Imagine a time with no steam engines, no electric cars, no factories, and no communication lines connecting places. Everything was quiet, raw, and untouched by modern life. Instead of cities and roads, there were vast, dark forests stretching across the land. Wild animals like wolves and bears lived freely there. In low areas, you would find still, marshy pools and open land that had never been farmed or cultivated. Here and there, small groups of people lived in simple huts made from woven branches and mud. These huts had no windows, just a small opening at the top to let the smoke escape. They were usually built near forests, and for protection, people dug ditches around them or stacked large tree trunks to keep dangerous animals away. What they called towns were really just clusters of these basic huts. The people themselves looked quite different from us. They were tall, with fair skin, blue eyes, and long light-colored hair. But their way of life was very primitive, though. They didn't know how to read or write, and many wore very little clothing, often just animal skins. To appear strong and intimidating, they painted their faces and bodies with blue dye. They didn't use coins like we do today. Instead, they used metal rings as a form of money. They were skilled at weaving baskets and could make rough cloth, but their pottery was simple and not very refined. For traveling on water, they used small boats called coracles. These were made from woven twigs and covered with animal skins, making them light and flexible enough to move across rivers and lakes. They used these small boats to move along rivers and catch fish. Instead of modern tools, they used simple wooden spears to hunt fish or hooks made from bone. Their boats were so light that even a young boy could carry one on his back and take it home. Many of the Britons were hunters. They survived by hunting animals and gathering wild fruits from the forests. Others were herdsmen, depending mainly on milk and the meat of their cattle for food. A small number of them, especially those living in the southern parts, were slightly more advanced. They grew small amounts of grain and sometimes traded with merchants who came from lands across the sea. When it came to weapons, they made swords using a mix of copper and tin. However, these swords were not very strong and could easily bend if struck hard. Along with swords, they also used light shields, short-pointed daggers, and spears for hunting and protection. In battle, they had some unusual but clever techniques. After throwing their spears or daggers at an enemy, they could pull them back using long leather straps attached to the weapons. At the end of these weapons, there was often a small rattle, which they used to scare the enemy's horses and create confusion during fights. The Britons were not united as one nation. Instead, they were divided into many tribes, each ruled by its own small king. Because of this, they were often fighting among themselves, as was common among tribes in those times. They had a strong love for horses and were highly skilled at training and controlling them. One of their most powerful tools in battle was the war chariot. These chariots were designed with sharp, curved blades attached to the wheels, which could cause serious damage when driven into groups of enemies. Their skill in using chariots was impressive. Even at full speed, the horses would stop instantly at the driver's command. Warriors would jump out, fight fiercely with their swords, then quickly leap back onto the chariot or even onto the horses and speed away again. However, their beliefs were very different from what we know today. They did not believe in one true God. Instead, they worshipped natural elements like the sun and the moon and considered mistletoe growing on oak trees to be sacred. Their religious leaders were known as Druids, who taught that after death, a person's soul would enter the body of an animal. They also believed that burning their captured enemies in sacrifices was something that pleased their gods. The Druids held great power over the people. They acted like judges, settling disputes and making important decisions. If anyone refused to follow their orders, that person would be treated as an outcast and pushed away from the tribe. Their religious ceremonies often took place deep within dark oak forests, creating a mysterious and serious atmosphere. At times, they even sacrificed large numbers of men and women as offerings to their gods. One of the plants they respected the most was mistletoe, especially when it was found growing on an oak tree. On the first day of the new year, the chief druid would gather the tribe and, in a special ceremony, cut the mistletoe using a golden sickle. The plant was then divided into small pieces and given to people as a symbol of good luck for the coming year. Even today, during Christmas, people still decorate their homes with mistletoe. This tradition reminds us of those ancient customs. But now it carries a deeper and more positive meaning, because mistletoe